And we're back with part two of our point guard list. We did our 25 to 15 on the first
Yep.
episode, and then we took a nice break. So we're actually going to kick off before we even get to the list. We're obviously going to ask you guys to subscribe. That would be fantastic. But aside from that, we're going to talk about a couple guys who we didn't speak about yesterday on our list, who a lot of people might have thought think maybe should have made our top 25, but they didn't. In one particular one, would be a guy who had over 20 points per game last year in Spencer Dinwiddie.
And it really surprised me with Dinwiddie. Really surprised me that we had him that low because he did very little wrong. He's brought Brooklyn to the playoffs 2 years in a row now. He's overall a very good player. He's lengthy. He's really good at defending. I guess the consensus is that with the Kyrie Irving healthy, with Kevin Durant healthy, he's not going to get minutes. That's the only consensus. But the guy got 26, 7 and 3. 27 and 3. Like that's he was an elite player last year. He was much better than a lot of the players on top of him, to be honest. I just I don't see him doing anything wrong out there. He's not the best shooter in the world, but that's what hurts him. That on this team, there's going to be a lot of open shots for people that shoot threes because of Durant's and Irving's capabilities inside the paint and on drives. But yeah, the overall consensus is that Dinwiddie's just not going to get the playing time to be able to put in these minutes
Yeah,
and get the production.
yeah, and I was in the same boat. I did have him, I believe, just in my 25th position, just because, I mean, his year last year was so good, it's hard not to have him in the top 25. But at the same time, when again, like we don't know how much production this guy's even going to have this year on Brooklyn. We don't even know where he's going to play. We don't know anything along those lines, really. But yeah, it was still a guy who was seventh last year in point guards for points. Anytime a guy's seventh in points in his position and he misses a top 25, it just you feel like the people making the top 25 have to be doing it wrong. But obviously, we're the ones who made it, so we can't critique ourselves. But it's just in the regard of, like we said, who's like how much is he even going to play? We know he's a very good player, and I'm sure in future years to come, he's going to make our list. Like you said, he had 7 assists last year, and he also had the fifth best turnover ratio for starters. So it's not a guy who, even at this young age, is struggling at any of the NBA aspects. I believe he was also fourth in free throw attempts. He obviously has to be a bit more efficient with the shots, but in terms of still being able to find a way to put the ball in the net, being a great passer, not turning the ball over, he's really what you wanted a point guard, and still doesn't make our list.
Yeah, it's quite incredible to be honest, especially when you consider back last year he played alongside Kyrie in a number of games, and in those games he was actually averaging close to 20 points per game. On top of Karis LeVert, on top of Joe Harris, on top of Jarrett Allen, DeAndre Jordan. And this is in the meantime, sure, Kyrie Irving's a much better player, and that's why he's going to get the playing time and the usage. Kyrie was putting up about 25 at that point, um, if not higher. So he's clearly a better player than Dinwiddie, but damn, Dinwiddie's a really great player. If he can prove to coexist, maybe they trade away the other guys and bring in somebody, but I don't know if they should get rid of Dinwiddie just because he has so much skill. That being said, if another team gets him, he can even go up. Like he was putting up these stats alongside Kyrie. I know Kyrie didn't play that much last year because he was hurt, but he put up very good stats alongside Kyrie. Playing on his own, he'll continue to put up the 21 points per game, and he'll be a leader of a team. I can name a hell of a lot of teams in this league that he would be the starter on right now. It
Oh,
just Brooklyn's not one of them.
definitely, and we even say that, and I mean Kyrie's a guy who's pretty injury prone, and that's something that again I guess we just have so much faith in the skill of Kyrie, and we know he's going to get a lot of playing time. But in reality, if he plays anywhere between 40 and 50 games, and then when he starts 20 and he still plays 25 off the bench, like you said, he could easily go 20 and 7 again. And this year he has Kevin Durant to pass the ball to, so
Exactly.
that's something that's going to benefit him. We all know immensely too. So yeah, even with Kyrie there, he could still have a good of his year, and we just maybe overlooked him. And this might got be a guy that both of us just completely just flew over for whatever reason.
Completely agree. If they somehow actually think about playing Durant at center and they're able to fit a small ball lineup, With Dinwiddie, Levert, Joe Harris, and Kyrie, that defensively would be very weak, especially in the paint. But offensively, that would be the best lineup in the league.
Oh, absolutely. And we, in our season preview, would definitely talk about Brooklyn, where they could be at the top of the conference or they could be near a bottom of a playoff spot, but they just have so much talent offensively, like you said.
But with that being said, point guard's a very, very deep position. As you guys have watched our rankings so far, Dinwiddie does not make the cut. Moving on past Dinwiddie, sad to say, we have another player who puts up similar assists as Dinwiddie, half the amount of points, but has the potential to be such a great player. We have Lonzo Ball here, who came in, I believe, 27th.
Yeah, I mean,
Crazy.
yeah, I mean, hopefully Mr. LeVar doesn't watch this because our whole list will probably get restricted off YouTube somehow. Just he'll find a way just to make it the most hated thing out there. But with that being said, like you said, a guy who, in terms of passing the ball, definitely one of the best point guards already. His vision, his ability to complete long-term court passes, like his brother we've seen in his very short period too. They both have great vision in that sense. They both have super strong arms. Lonzo too, his shooting has gotten a lot better in comparison to year two versus year three. Last year, he's still shooting under 65% from free throw, but he still jumped over, I believe, 13%. And from three, he's up to 38% now, too. And he takes
He's not bad.
exactly. So he's finally at least finding a way to score. He was second in blocks for point guards, tied for 10th in steals for point guard. But yeah, he still did have one of the worst overall field goal percentage among any player with 10 shots or more at the point guard position. So still needs to be a bit more efficient. Probably we don't even know if he'd be
A little more aggressive.
yeah, we don't even know if he'll be the starter on the Pelicans team either. So it still might take a couple more years for Ball to even get that job. So that's why, in my mind, he's off the top 25 today.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. I think the potential is there for him to become a great player still. I think that he has the potential to be on the level of someone like Jason Kidd, in my mind. Potential, just not there yet right now.
Definitely. And who else did we have that just missed out?
Oh, this one we got a Clippers double whammy.
A double
We
win.
got two Clippers point guards that most people would consider in the top 30. They do very, very well. I don't know how they didn't make it considering their career. We have Pat Beverly and Lou Williams. Beverly's gonna be mad at us. He's probably gonna go cry about it. Lou Williams is gonna somehow put up 30 points per game and shout us out after and be like, "See, fuck you guys." But they couldn't make it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, maybe Lou will make a rap song about us. Who knows? But
Perfect.
either way, they both miss it. Lou Williams, a guy, definitely one of the best just pure scorers at the point guard position. And quietly, he usually puts up over 5 assists per game. Did it again last year too. He's a
Yeah.
guy who plays a lot of minutes, even though for like he's not a starter, but it's just because for whatever reason they don't start him. He still plays.
It's a man who Ginobili role, right?
Yeah, it's yeah, and he's just so good at it too, no matter where he is. He's been so consistent with it, whether it's with Toronto, the Los Angeles now, several other teams he played for, Philadelphia. He's just always been that great scorer. I guess it's just really the fact that, like we said, he's not a starter, and all these other guys are, and the fact that we know what he is, I guess, and we just know that okay, you're a great scorer. We know he can pass the ball decently, but we don't really think, I guess, of Lou Williams when it comes to great point guards. And most people on this list, you can make an argument, are actually a pretty great point guard.
And I can't agree with you more because like if you're looking at our list, like we have people like Mike Conley who barely made the top 20, people like Brogdon and Bledsoe, DeJounte Murray, who are barely in the top 25. So these are guys that are if they're not career proven vets, they're up and coming players, and something like Lou Williams to me is just on the decline at this point. Even though he put up a great year last year, he's going to slow down eventually. He's not big. He's not tall. He doesn't play defense. He has a lot of aspects of the game that hurt him. The reason why he goes against the second units, the reason why he's on the bench, is because he can dominate the second units because there's not as many great defensive players, and he doesn't have to go against the great offensive players. It's the only reason he comes off the bench. That's why he's come off the bench for years. and that's the perfect role for Lou Williams. But in the long run, unless I need buckets fast, he's not closing out my games if we're down by 1 or up by 1. Maybe if we're down by 1 if we need a basket, but if we're up by 1 or 2, Lou Williams is not out there anymore. So that's why he couldn't make it for me. But I find it funny because I had this other guy, I had him in my top 25, but I had Pat Beverly actually ranked coming in at, I had him 25th on my personal list, but he didn't make the cut, Pat Beverly. And he's the complete opposite of Lou Williams.
Yeah.
He can still shoot the ball very well, but he is the best defensive point guard in this league right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's a guy who is top 10 for both blocks and steals at point guard, and he was also the best defensive real plus minus point guard. So yeah, like you said, a guy who obviously not just in terms of being a hustle guy, like guys like Deladova and Marcus Smart, he's also a guy who is really able to put up the numbers too to support that. Like you said, actually a really good shooter too. He's fourth in point guards with a 3-point percentage just under 40%. So it's a guy who definitely doesn't get enough credit. It's probably because he only puts up the last 2 years 7 per game. But at the same time, he did put up 11 for Houston 3 years ago, and maybe if he did that, he'd get a bit more recognition. He's obviously on a team that other people are scoring a lot, but I guess because he gets overlooked on the offensive end so much, that's why he misses out. But defensively, definitely can't doubt that he's one of not only the best point guards but players in the league.
I think that his defense should get him a little more recognition because I think he could put it up a little more offensively if they needed him to. But look at that team. You have Kawhi Leonard, 25 points. Paul George, 22 to 25 points. This year, you're going to have Serge Ibaka, 15 points. You still have Luke Kennard came in there, 15 points. Lou Williams, 15 points at 20 points. Right there, we're already above 100 points. There's no shots for him right now, and he doesn't need to put up those shots, so he knows he doesn't need to. But all he has to do out there is be a threat.
You know what
All
I?
he has to do is grab a defender and pull him out.
Yeah, you know what I
Right?
I think like the perfect situation for Patrick Beverly isn't necessarily the regular season. It's going to be like in a playoff series against a guy like John Morant, who's so young, and he hasn't had a seven
Just
game
dominate
series
him.
against, yeah, just a pest like that. Where by game 4 or 5, if the Clippers, let's say it's 2-2, 3-1 Los Angeles, yeah, I think you're really going to see a guy who is younger have his morale decline because Beverly is just such a pest like that. That's where he really shines. But in terms of like regular season success, I think he's a guy that just he isn't good for a list like this, I feel.
Exactly. It's sad to say, but it's just a very deep position.
Definitely. And with that being said, I mean, we're going to move on to the top 15 here. So who do we have? 14. So yeah, who do we have?
Here at number 14, we have a very good player. So of course, we had John Morant, number 15. John Morant, it could be a player that could easily break into our top 10. He's looking prime for a breakout season. But this player on top of him just a little more proven, and he's going to play a very integral role on a very good team. We have Drew Holiday going to be playing with Milwaukee. First time playing with a real contender in his whole career. And he's got a chance to put something special together.
Yeah, this is a guy who I believe I might have even had in my top 10, if I'm being honest, just basically for that reason you said. It's one of the first times, at least in a while, that he's actually been on a real contender. And not only that, we already know what Drew Holiday could do in terms of being able not only to score the ball, but in terms of being one of the best defensive guards between point guard and shooting guard in the league. He's always
Exactly.
on top of the league in terms of real plus minus for defenders. He's a guy who he doesn't shy away from guarding the top guys, he could put up over 20 per game. He's done it in multiple years. He's done it without problem too. So he's not a guy who I think is going to struggle with the trade. I don't think he was necessarily the best fit for Milwaukee when the trade happened. But the more you look at Drew Holiday and you consider it, he's just really an upgraded Eric Bledsoe. So I think he's actually going to fit in pretty good there, honestly.
Yeah, no, exactly. He does everything Bledsoe does, but a little bit better. He is the only thing that Bledsoe might do a little bit better. I'm not even sure really because defensively, Holiday's better. As a playmaker, Holiday is usually not even the main playmaker, and he still puts up a good assist number. He's a very good 3-point shooter. I was going to say Bledsoe's a better 3-point shooter, but consistently Holiday has proven to be on the same level, if not better. So I see him bringing improvements to that team. I was disappointed that they got rid of George Hill because I've seen him as a very good fit for that team at the same time. But I'm hoping that Holiday is just that he shows up in the playoffs. That was the worst thing for Bledsoe. He couldn't show up in the playoffs as an above average starting point guard. And Holiday, I just don't see him ever not giving the effort that it needs.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a guy also who, looking at it, he hasn't averaged less than 6 assists since 2011,
No,
2012. So having a guy who's actually able to set up guys like Giannis and set up guys like Chris Middleton on a consistent basis, and also at the same time make up for maybe some of the lack of scoring ability around them when maybe they're off the court and it's guys like Dante only put up 10 a game, and your other surrounding players. You now have Drew Holiday, who you could, when you use your obviously they're going to use their lineup and their rotation correctly. They're probably never going to have a time where Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis are all on the bench. So they're going to have a top player out there at all times, and that's going to help them a lot, I think. So I'm excited to see how he does there. For my sake, I hope he does really good because, like I said, I did have him high on the list. But I understand too, where some people, compared to some other guys, he isn't consistent in terms of offensive production, which hurts him a bit. Because I mean, we're going to see soon that 30 points per game might not even get you a top five spot. So having under 20 per game year to year at the point guard position and being a 7 assist guy doesn't necessarily do much for you. It's really just the fact that he is such a good defender that even grants him that top five ability. And this year, if he could actually put together some big playoff wins, like we said, we could definitely probably see him move up on list to come.
and that's exactly it. And I think that he's a perfect fit for Milwaukee. I think he's going to do very, very well there. And that contender thing, that's just a big thing for him. Think think of it. He's never played on a team where he can take a second off on defense on this team. They have Giannis, they have Middleton, they have Brook Lopez, who's still a very good defender. They have such a great defensive team. He's not going to have to go 110% at all seconds of the time. He can probably go and do very well inside of on offense as well. Like he's gonna improve his offense because he's not gonna have to use as much effort on defense because they're just gonna be winning games. That's what Milwaukee does. They win games by a lot and then they sit their players. So I think it's a great fit for him, and it's perfect that he's not gonna have to give as much effort all the time. That way he's gonna be able to extend his career and really be a little more efficient on that offensive end as well. So I just see it as a perfect fit, to be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting because it was a guy who was eighth in minutes played at point guard last year, and then, like you said, they only run Giannis 30 minutes a game. So maybe
That
we're going to see the least amount of minutes per game, but we might see the same production, which is definitely going to maybe help him come playoff
better.
time, like you're suggesting too.
Exactly. And I see him sticking around this spot, maybe even going a couple spots higher. This is a very deep position. Our top 5 to 10 are very, very, very good. So this is still a very good spot for a player like Drew Holiday, but he could easily be on any given night a top 10 point guard in this league.
Yeah, especially on the defensive end. I mean, first in
Oh,
blocks last
he's
year for point guards, top five in
probably
steals.
right behind maybe Pat Beverly, and that's it.
I would, yeah, definitely agree.
But still a good player. Still not. He's kind of topped out. We know what he is. That's the reason why he's a little bit lower than the next player we have ranked over him. Because the next player we have ranked over him here at 13th spot, just over Drew Holiday at 14th, we have Fred VanVleet. So Freddie, undrafted, just got paid, and now we consider him better than Drew Holiday. What a crazy world we live in.
Yeah,
Great, love it.
yeah, he's a guy who I believe I just had him cracking my top 15 or borderline. Personally, he's one of my favorite players. But just based off, I guess, the fact that they do have Kyle Lowry, they do have Norman Powell, and as well on top of that, there is so many good guards. I don't view him as quite top 10 yet. But in terms of the things he could do, he's definitely a really, really good player. He's useful in a lot of different ways. He doesn't crack under the pressure. We saw last year in the playoff run, of course, they didn't win, but he was replacing Lowry in the sense of when it came crunch time, Fred was taking a lot of the big shots in that Boston series. So obviously they're looking to do that transition, and Fred's a great player to replace a guy like Lowry.
He's learned so much from Lowry. He's essentially turning into a very similar player than Lowry what is currently. And everyone forgets that it took Kyle Lowry 6-7 years to become an actual consistent starter in this league, where he was actually being that above average player, even average player. It took him a little while. He went through a couple. Back when he was in Houston, he wasn't exactly a star. He was coming off the bench half the games. He was a great backup. He was what we would have considered Fred VanVleet a year or two ago. A great backup and good in spot starter minutes. Yeah, Lowry turned himself into a Hall of Famer. And Freddie's learning right now from a Hall of Famer. He's getting mentored every single day. And we're seeing that right now with Milwaukee Flynn as well, that they're passing that on. They're the same height. They play a very similar game. They're both very great shooters. There's a couple aspects of Fred's game that aren't there yet as compared to Lowry. But I just see Fred as a very, very good point guard in this league. Do I see him as a top 5 ever? Probably not. But he doesn't need to be. Like, this guy was undrafted. This guy has proven everyone wrong. And he is a major part of the reason why the Raptors have been such a successful team. His role last year was integral. I still remember the day that one day whenever there was all these injuries and VanVleet was in the starting lineup, and Powell was coming back from an injury, Lowry was back from an injury, and the reporter asked Nick Nurse, "Oh, so like now that we're having a full team, like, oh, so who's gonna Fred's gonna go back on the bench?" And Nick Nurse literally says, "Someone is. I don't think Fred is." So and that's a 52 to 53 win team, and he's a starter on it, and he's one of the main reasons why they're that good. I can only see him getting better. There's a couple players higher on this list that are really getting a little bit older that he can easily pass in the next couple of years. I don't know if he'll crack that top 5 for a very long time. If he does get there, he might get there. Kyle Lowry was arguably considered a top 5 point guard the last couple of years, or very, very close to it for that matter. He might be getting a little bit older now, but he was. And Fred, if anything, has a jump start on it.
Yeah, I don't think he'll ever get top 5 personally. And again,
No,
this is a guy.
I don't think so either, but very, very close.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who, I mean, he's already ahead of guys, even though in our segment we did say be a lot based off limited playing time, but already guys ahead of guys like Kemba Walker on our list, Drew Holiday, like you said. More importantly, I'd say maybe a guy like Mike Conley, who they're very similar in the things that they do. And Fred's already obviously we see more value because he is on the rise, and Conley's obviously on the decline. Fred's a guy who was actually third in steals among point guards last year, and he was also a guy who was third among 3-point percentage for them as well. Really, the only knock is the fact that he did have one of the worst field goal percentage among point guards. I do feel like he takes a lot of unnecessary bad shots. They do drag out the shot clock a lot in their possession sometimes, which leads to that. But at the same time, again, when a guy is so high in the 3-point category and his field goal percentage is lower, I guess you could forgive it because again, you know that he is taking a lot of difficult shots. So that's what it comes down to. A large percentage, I would say maybe 40 to 50% of his shots probably are 3-pointers. So I don't think that's something that's going to be a huge hurdle. I think he'll be at least borderline top 10, and I think that's kind of where we'll see him top out. It's really just a matter of when he gets the full reins of being the starting point guard versus the starting flex shooting guard point guard.
Yeah, right now he leads the team, and in all reality, for a good chunk of the game, even when Lowry's on the court, Fred runs the offense. It gives Lowry a lot of minutes off, and that's why I think they're the perfect tandem together. I think I had Fred a little bit higher ranked than you, I think, mainly because sad to say, I can picture a Kyle Lowry trade this year. I don't want to say that, but I can picture it. It might be very smart and beneficial to the team. I know, don't kill me, guys. I love Lowry, and we'll see him soon on this list. But that's where I'm thinking at, and I can only see him improving on the year last year, and he still already had a very, very efficient 17-6-4 year. If you round up, it was 18-7 and 4. So He's already a very good player. He plays very hard defensively and doesn't take a second off. That's why I have him so highly ranked. That being said, until he does get to be that starting point guard by himself, we don't know what his actual potential is.
Yeah, he did play 36 minutes per game basically last year too. So a guy
He's
who,
playing.
yeah, and I mean, in reality, if you could get 36 minutes a game from a starter and you only need 12 minutes from a bench guy, that's a very good aspect in its own right. Not to mention they do have at least, I would say, a one good bench player position, both at point guard and shooting guard off the bench. So those 12 minutes a game are nothing to fill, honestly.
Exactly, and they have a great team there in Toronto. And even though certain players like Lowry are getting a little bit older, other players like Freddie are coming into their prime.
Definitely. And with that, like you said, maybe we'll see a top 10 spot next year for him.
Yeah, I can see him jumping this next guy. So just right on top of Fred VanVleet, we had him at the 13th spot. Here we have at the number 12 spot a player who very likely Fred's going to jump very soon because he's getting old. We clearly value his IQ. Chris Paul. People are going to say, what the hell, guys? He's a top 5 point guard. He's the smartest point guard in the league. Yeah, that's accurate. But he's getting old.
Yeah, that's all it comes down to, really. Where in terms of the numbers that are put up on the board, obviously we do see Chris Paul starting to take a bit of a decline, and just because the list is really just a term of really just the regular season players, we know that pretty much everyone ahead of them on this list has the potential to easily be a 22 and 10 guy, if not more. Chris Paul, we're probably going to see maybe not a huge point production increase, but I mean, does he have the ability to put up 10 assists this year? Definitely. We might
Oh,
even
yeah,
see
I
a
think
career high
he
for
will.
assists this year. And like you said, one of the best IQs in this league to this day. We often forget about his defensive ability, one of the best defensive point guards as well. And obviously a lot of experience. Both obviously hasn't won a title yet, but in terms of deep playoff runs, in terms of being around the league, in terms of whatever it is, Chris Paul is the guy who is going to be able to mentor the people around him. We're probably going to see that Phoenix team make the playoffs, and I spoke about it in another video. They might have 3 All-Stars this year, and if Chris Paul is an All-Star, then 12th spot is definitely going to be something that is not justified. It's definitely going to be a lot higher that he should have deserved.
It's it's difficult because we're looking at a list where we have at least two guys on top of Chris Paul that didn't even play last year.
Hmm.
So it's very, very difficult to gauge. Um, and it just comes down to, yeah, Chris Paul is gonna age very nicely because he's such a smart player, but he's just not as gifted physically as he used to be, and it's getting a little bit more difficult for him to keep up with the Damian Lillards, the Kyrie Irvings, the guys that are still in their prime, let alone the young guys like Fox, even someone like John Morant in the next couple of years is going to be coming very, very quickly. And Chris Paul is aging very nicely, but he's still aging. He's not LeBron where he's going to be this physical presence until he's 45. But with that being said, can he be an all-star next year? Of course he can. If that Phoenix team is in the playoffs, it's because of Chris Paul. He's one of those players that he does the little things, but he makes everyone around him better. Him and LeBron James are probably the two best players in the league at doing that. They just make everyone around them better. That's why OKC was a playoff team last year. They were not just a playoff team, but they were competing in the playoffs, like putting very good effort and coming very close to beating a very good team. So I think that Phoenix is going to be a playoff team next year. And if Phoenix is a playoff team, then Chris Paul is a lock for an All-Star
Yeah,
because it's because of him.
yeah, it definitely helps it's fan voted too because people love that
Exactly.
Phoenix team and Chris Paul obviously very liked by fans too. But yeah, I could definitely see a small dip in the point production somewhere between 14 to 16 a game this year, but the assists I don't think are going to go down at all. Definitely potentially
They're
be
going to go
double
up.
digit. And I mean, like you said too, a guy who is very good at not only making people around him better, but also making every possession count. He was one of the, I believe, second best in terms of field goal percentage. Him and Kyrie were the only free throw or point guards to shoot above 90% for free throws, and Kyrie only played 20 games versus Chris Paul played the whole season. So in reality, Chris Paul was the only guy to play the whole year who shot above 90% from the line. So again, he's a guy who, when he has the ball and he's putting it up, it's probably going in. And it's like he's not taking bad shots. He's not making bad passes. He knows
Never.
Exactly. He knows what to do. Third in true shooting percentage, second in the defensive RPM behind only Patrick Beverly, which again, very forgotten, and also a top 10 rebounder, where we talk about how physically maybe he's less gifted, but in terms of knowing when and where to grab the ball off the net, it's something that he's able to do with ease still.
Oh, exactly. Like he does the things that need to be done. He does everything that needs to be done, whether it is offensively, defensively. He'll take a charge. He'll shoot up a clutch 3-pointer. He'll get in the ref's face if he needs to, not just if he needs to, pretty much all game. He's there for his teammates, and he might score a little bit less, but the assist will still be there. Defense is still going to be there, and he'll still continue to be a borderline top 10 point guard at any given time until he retires.
Yeah, and in reality, I think the main thing that makes him so high is if you look at a guy like Ricky Rubio, who was the point guard in Phoenix last year, numbers wise, it's not going to be that different, I think. But Chris Paul is just so much more vocal, both on and off the court, where his rebounding so high because his defensive rebounding, he was actually sixth in point guard. And he's a guy who, when he sees it goes up, if he knows it's going to be a miss, he yells ball, he gets in position, he grabs it because he's ready to make that offense go. He's not waiting for guys and just waiting for it to come off the rim, whatever. He sees the chance to get it. He's like, all right, I'm going to get the ball back anyways. Why would I let someone else grab it and not run up and pass it to me when I can just do it myself and we can keep going? So that's Chris Paul, just very good at little things like that. And like I said, that voice alone is really what's going to make the big difference between a guy like Rubio for Phoenix versus a guy like Paul for Phoenix.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it's going to show in the playoffs next year, especially considering they traded away a player like Oubre, who many would have thought would have been a big part of that playoff success, especially if they would have been able to keep Rubio, keep Oubre. You look at both those players combined, of course, the production's higher than Chris Paul, but it's the little things like you're saying, being vocal, getting the defense organized, being the offensive coordinator. He'll keep doing very good in this league, and the player we have on top of Chris Paul is another very good example of one of those players who does the little things. We have Kyle Lowry on top of Chris Paul. I know that Kyle Lowry in his prime is not the player Chris Paul ever was in his prime, but Kyle Lowry is still a borderline all-star in this league. He was still an all-star last year. He's still a very, very good player. If anything, he had a great year last year. He had a better year than he's been putting up lately.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and again, and like you said, in terms of putting up a better year than lately, it was a huge jump last year for Kyle Lowry, where he really looked like himself again. And it's the weird thing is even though he did miss a few games with injury, he still kind of looks like his body just feels like it's just not what it used to be. Where even when he runs, he just kind of looks hobbled. But with that being said, he knows how to still play 36 minutes a game and be very efficient in that whole time. I feel like
I can't believe he played 36 minutes last year.
that's
That's
what I
ridiculous.
he looks like he's hobbled, but somehow he still plays every minute when he's out there. He's one of the hardest nosed players in the game. He was a guy who put up what 16 and 7 last year, if I'm not mistaken. And he's also
No, 19 and 7.5,
19 and 7.5, and he's also
and 5 rebounds.
yeah, I was going to say ninth in rebounding, just above Chris Paul as well. So and six in assists. So yeah, in terms of being able to put up top 10 numbers across the board, Kyle Lowry last year still did it. And personally, I originally had him in my top 10, and I only moved him down mainly because I felt like guys like John Wall and Steph Curry have something to prove this year, and Kyle Lowry has nothing to prove. He's just a guy who, as long as I would say, does enough to just keep extending his career, I think that's the smart move for Lowry because the Raptors really only need to perform the playoffs. As long as they make it, that team is good enough to beat anyone. So I feel like they can take a lot of off nights, and I feel like Lowry is going to be part of those. Some off nights where they might not rest, but he might not be the guy who is playing 36 minutes a game anymore for 10 to 15 games this year, just to give his body some extra rest.
And that's what we all really, really hope, because when people look at Kyle Lowry, you don't think of him on the same level as like a Kawhi or any of those players that does a lot of load management and minute restrictions. You think of this guy who just goes out there and gives it his all every single minute.
Hmm.
Luckily, in the last year or two, he's been playing alongside Fred VanVleet, Fred's been taking a lot of the offensive possessions, as I mentioned during the Fred video.
Hmm.
It's still Kyle Lowry's team, though. And as we were saying the same thing about Chris Paul, about how he's so vocal on defense. He's an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, gets in the ref's face. He's vocal. He stands up for his teammates. Those are all the same exact traits Lowry
Abs-
has, Lowry has shown, except for Lowry's won a championship with it.
yeah. And I mean,
And right now, like,
I would say he's a better three-point shooter as well. Like when they're running a
yeah,
play and Kyle Lowry gets that ball back at the top of the three-point line, it's a gimme. Like it just feels like every time he takes that three, it's going in. And he's gotten so good at that specific shot over the years, where it was really even in the playoff seasons with playoff runs with DeMar, it was one of the shots that even when they were struggling was one of the more consistent ones. And he's just continued to use it over and over, and it's one of his signature moves. And he's one of the few guys who has a signature move in that regard.
key shot. If he's a fantastic 3-point shooter, and he's shown it his whole career. Like he didn't put it up he's not exactly a Steph Curry level marksman, but whenever the plays ran for him and he had that open shot, he does hit it.
Oh yeah.
And I think back of the playoffs last year, and just his playmaking, or even that pass to OG, like we all thought that game was over. Like finito. Don't worry about it. See you later, Raptors, out of the playoffs. And then, like, Kyle Lowry's 6 foot tall.
Mm.
Taco Fall is 7'4" or 7'3" or whatever fuck he is, tallest guy in the league. Standing in front of him, and the fact that Kyle Lowry is able to get that pass off, like I texted somebody that morning. I don't know if it was you, another buddy, but I said Kyle Lowry is the NBA's Tom Brady with that pass, because it was just so pinpoint. The only other player I can see in this league doing that is LeBron James.
Yeah, maybe Lonzo Ball now, but yeah, in terms of guys who we've seen do it, yeah, it's really only like guys like Kyrie and LeBron, like you said.
Like
Or,
it's incredible.
yeah.
Like it's Kyle he does things so well. He does everything so well, and it's just sad that it took him a little bit in his career to get up to that level, and that nobody respected him and DeMar. They should have respected him and DeMar. They were Eastern Conference Finals almost every year. They just fell apart to LeBron. It's not their fault. Everyone did.
Yeah, and I mean, when at the end of the day, when you have a title and so many on these other guys, so many of the other guys on this list don't, that definitely justifies you a higher spot, even when we're talking about just who's going to do better this year. But yeah, I mean, I don't blame anyone who has him in the top 10 because we know as a player, he definitely deserves a top 10
Easily.
spot. It's just too, like when you look at the top 10, it's insane at this list. I mentioned a
Oh,
couple
the top 12 is insane. Chris
yeah,
Paul's number 12. Kyle Lowry's number 11.
exactly. And these are both guys who we know have, like you said, we're all stars
Top 5 potential.
yeah, we're all stars last year, could easily be this year, especially with fan votes. And somehow they're still not even in the top 10. It's crazy.
Like when it comes down to the nitty gritty, these two players, Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry, I would probably take them in a playoff series, in a 7-game playoff series, than all but maybe 3 of these point guards are about to name.
If I was making a Team USA team, I would take Paul or Lowry over a lot of these guys in the top 10, honestly.
To be my starting point guard,
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
They just do those roles very very well. They play hard every single minute. You can kind of see that for these guys on top of them, but in all reality, like it's just the age factor, that the fact that they're slowing down, and throughout a 72 game season or an 82 game season, like regularly, we know that they're not gonna be able to put up the production these other guys will. But in a 1 gamer or in a 7-game series, I'm taking Kyle Lowry or Chris Paul any day of the week, except for maybe 2 or 3 of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, even a guy who we're going to see a lot higher on this, even a guy like Ben Simmons. If I have a game 7, I'm taking
Kyle Lowry
any day, any day. But still,
Yep.
obviously, we're talking about regular season here, so he doesn't end up there. But yeah, in terms of we know what he could do. Any Toronto fan, any playoff fan, anyone knows what Kyle Lowry can do in big moments. And it's fun to see. He's a guy too with the energy. It's great when he hits a big shot in the playoffs. Everyone loves it. Crowds go wild. Everyone watching goes wild. You love it when he hits a shot.
It hits the shot, makes a pass, takes a charge, the best
Oh,
in the whole league at taking charges.
that's an
Don't forget that.
yeah,
Like
very.
literally the whole league. It's not even close. He's the best in the league at taking charges.
Yes, definitely. And that's
Gets
something.
run the hell over.
Yeah, we almost didn't even mention that, but absolutely, that's one of the things that, like you said, does all the little things right. And yes, definitely a guy. I don't even know if it's true if he actually takes the most charges, but just off the top of my head, I would definitely.
Looks like it.
Yeah, definitely.
The eye test tells me I've seen him get run over by LeBron way too many times for him to be still standing.
Absolutely.
But it's funny how we're going from Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry, and then we go into number 10 here. And Atlanta fans are going to hate us because we put a guy who went 29-9. I repeat, 29-9. I'm not even putting the points on there because I don't want to make it sound worse. Because we have Trae Young here at number 10. Sorry, Hawks fans. There's just a lot of good point guards. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who I had close to my top five, but even like you said, even I feel like if we didn't have a top five, Hawks fans would be mad because what you see in terms of just the points per game and basically being a double
If we
double.
didn't have him top 3, they'd
Yeah,
be mad.
exactly. And the reality is, though, as good as Trae Young is, before we go back to the season he's going to have, the reality is the Hawks relied on him so much and it didn't convert into anything. And that's why he is so low on this, where he might have been a guy who was third in value added, but he had the worst defensive real plus minus of point guards by a point and a half. Like that's a
Wasn't
guy.
even close.
Exactly. That's a guy who just had the best offensive real plus minus, but again, his defensive real plus minus, like a guy like Colin Sexton, we spoke about the exact same thing, where clearly their defense is just such a huge lacking point that it hurts them substantially. And not only that, he had almost 5 turnovers per game. I understand that most top players do average between 3 to 4. This guy had almost 5. Like he doesn't take care of the ball. He willingly just does showtime passes for the sake of just trying to make a highlight. He's just a highlight reel, and that's not a guy who's trying to win the game. And until we see him make that adjustment, I would rather see Trae Young put up 25-7 and the Hawks makes the playoffs and actually give him a top five spot than him put up 30-10 and just seem like a guy who cares about himself and only himself out there. I don't care about 10 assists. The 10 assists are for Trae Young. They're not for those guys who he passed the ball to.
He's a stuffer on a bad team, and he's not making that team any better. I see that team being a very good team this year.
Mm-hmm.
Trae Young has a lot of potential to be an important part of that team. But Trae Young is the type of player that all the other point guards in the league, whenever they go to play an Atlanta Hawks game, whether it's in Atlanta, whether it's in whoever's team's home court, and that point guard is, say they're going through a slump, and they see Atlanta in the schedule, and they're coming up tomorrow, they're going, wow, I'm pumped right now, because I'm going to go and carry up Trae Young. Everyone has career games against Trae Young. Like, Lillard must be just foaming at the mouth to be able to play him. Just because you're going to blow by him. You know he's going to miss defense. They're going to have to be forced to play help defense, which is going to open somebody else up, which in turn is going to open the original player up because they're going to be scrambling. And let's be honest, Trae Young is not good on a defensive scramble. He's not, like we're talking earlier about Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry being a defensive coordinator, being the player that really needs to put the team in the right spot to be effective. Trae Young needs a player to put him in the right spot because he's not doing it by himself.
Yeah, and I mean, if we look at a team, I would say last year, like OKC, where a guy like Dennis Schroeder, who had a really good year, and he used to be the Atlanta Hawk point guards before Trae Young. If they had Dennis Schroeder nowadays, who really made up for that huge lack of Trae Young's defensive ability, and was able to kind of calm the team down sometimes, I think they'd actually be a pretty close to already playoff team. But because it's out Trae Young out there 35 minutes per game, just doing Trae Young, it really hurts them. Um, we could sit here and say, again, obviously a great scorer. We can't take that away from him. One of the best in terms of not being shy to put up the ball. One of the best at getting to the free throw line. But I mean, he's not that efficient in reality. He's not a guy who shoots 40% from the three. He takes a lot of deep threes. He wants to be Steph Curry, and he's not.
He shoots still very well. He's still a very good shooter, but he's
not as good as a guy who shoots as often as he should, you would hope is. Again, when he has so many other good pieces around him too. He just needs to work everyone in there a lot
it'll
more.
be better next year.
Yeah, we have to hope so. I mean, we only have him 10, so I would even say maybe in a way we're assuming that next year's going to be similar. Maybe we're thinking it's probably going to take a couple more years to Trae Young to actually mature, and then we can start talking about a top five point guard. But right now, as a player, he's very immature.
Offensively, that he, like I say, he puts up a lot of deep threes, and he can score. He still gets you 30 and 10 regularly. He pretty much averaged it. So
Yep.
he still does put the basket in the net. But the fact that I didn't even know that stat about him being a point and a half worse than any other point guard in the league. probably any other player. Let's be honest.
I mean,
So like,
probably, yeah.
it's a very good chance by any other player. So I that just reinforces why I didn't have him in my top 10 personally. And Atlanta Hawks fans are going to be pissed off, and they're going to, if anything, you're going to comment on our videos telling us how we know nothing about basketball. Very biased. We tried to be not biased whatsoever by making this list. Tried very hard, but Trae Young cracks the top 10, and he got over players like Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry, which is a great accomplishment. And he could prove us wrong and easily jump into the top 5 next year. If he plays even average defense, gets a little bit more efficient, shoots maybe 1 or 2 less threes, but gets a 3-point up to like 37 or 38%, then yeah, he's probably a top 5 point guard in this league. If
Especially,
anything, he's probably a top 5 or 10 player in this league.
especially if the Hawks make the playoffs, then it's a whole nother discussion. Where
But
he was one of the players highest in usage rate, one of the highest in value added, but it still didn't add to wins because we
exactly,
know the things he does. So if he could actually convert that value and convert that usage into rates, like you said, convert that usage rate into wins, like you said, we're actually going to be talking about a guy who's definitely a top 5 point guard because we know he's the leader of the team already, but like I said, he's just overall too immature of a player to put ahead of
yeah,
everyone else on the list, basically.
exactly. And I hope the best for him. I still went very high. He has a great future ahead of him, and I think the whole Doncic and Trae Young trade is going to be debated for many years because Trae Young is going to get up to that level, but right now Doncic is on a whole other planet. It's not even close. So Trae Young, very good player, but he is top 10 point guard, but just barely. Moving on from Trae Young, though, we do have another player, and I'm very, very surprised that you had this player so highly regarded in your list. Well, surprised in a way, but we have John Wall coming in at number 9, and John Wall is a great player, but he didn't play last year. We don't really know what he's going to bring. I know why I had him high, but why did you have him high?
Honestly, as bad as it sounds, I know you can't hang a lot on the preseason, but seeing him actually come back and look actually pretty good alongside DeMarcus Cousins in that first game, that was a huge promise. The fact that, again, even in a preseason game where, yes, he's not playing against necessarily the starters on each team, but the fact that a guy could put up 21 points, actually look good in terms of dishing the ball, actually still look pretty quick off the step, it gave me a lot of hope for John Wall, where I know he has something to prove this year. He knows he has something to prove this year. The Houston Rockets know he has something to prove this year. Guys like James Harden are saying, I don't want to play with him. John Wall is going to be the show that guys
Horrible.
want to play with him. So that's why I think he's ahead of a guy like Kyle Lowry this year, who, of course, if I was maybe making a team, I would take Kyle Lowry, but I think John Wall is really going to come out just all the guns blazing this year. And I think he's at minimum going to play 60 games. So I think it's just going to look pretty good for him. He's going to be top 3 in assists. He's going to put likely over 20 per game. So I think it's going to be pretty justified here.
Yeah, people seem to forget that John Wall was a very, very, very good point guard. I know that he relied a lot on his offense, on his speed, when it comes to his athleticism. He was one of the fastest players in the league, if
Yeah.
not the fastest player in the league, right up there with like Westbrook. These guys are just they sprint everywhere. They try hard. What I love about Wall is he plays really good defense as well. People seem to forget that at one point he's not that far moved from being 23 and 11. 23 and 11. That's nobody gets 11 assists a game. He had 10.7 one year. And on any given year, he can have between 9 and 10 in his sleep. He's got such a great mind. He's got a better passing ability than someone like Kyle Lowry. Sad it is to say. But I just see him in a perfect role out there in Houston. Like he's leading that team now. Harden, leave. It's all good. They got John Wall. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I
We're
mean,
gonna compete.
yeah, we've seen a guy like Derrick Rose obviously come back from multiple injuries, and obviously not be necessarily the same player, but pretty close. The main difference was the fact that Rose is never that great of a shooter, versus a guy like Wall still has an ability to shoot. And he obviously Derrick Rose was just a high flyer. He was an athlete. He was gonna double hand dunk every single play, and it was torture on his knees. A guy like Wall might have been fast, like you said, but he's a guy who had no problem sacrificing a dunk for a layup kind of thing. So he's not a guy who I'm worried that even though he has had these injuries, that his game is going to take a huge effect. Where as long as he can stay healthy, I think his game is going to look very similar to what we previously seen. It's just a matter of him having to stay healthy. I'm having hope that his body stays together and that him having to prove something is going to justify this top 10 spot. Obviously, if he gets injured again, we look dumb here. And I
Different,
can take
yeah.
that blame, but in terms of skill wise, I know he's a top 10 player this year.
Exactly. And if he doesn't get injured, he will be. And even if I don't, they're going to get something for James Harden. They're going to get a very good player to go, either a very good player or a very good set of role players to go alongside John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, and Wood, on top of players like Eric Gordon and like PJ Tucker that they have there already. Look at the talent on that team. Outside of maybe Bradley Beal when he was in Washington, they did not have a very talented team around John Wall. They did not. They had a bunch of proven vets that were average at best at the position, but they didn't have other players that were considered stars. They didn't have above average role players. They had Paul Pierce out those couple years. Paul Pierce was like 39 years old. Like they did not have a very great team around him, but they still had a very good amount of success. This team in Houston, even without whatever they're going to get from the Harden trade, is just as talented as any Washington team he's ever played for, let alone what they're going to get from the Harden trade. I think Harden should stay there. I think he's being an idiot for leaving. But, hey, John Wall's going to take advantage of it, and he's going to be the leader of that team. And until maybe we're going to look like idiots for having him at number 9 if he doesn't play. But he's been looking very good in preseason, and if that's any indicator, I think he's back.
Yeah, definitely, and that's obviously why we have it in our top 10, especially over some of the guys on this list too who were below him. It's hard to have him above a guy like Chris Paul, who we said John Wall put up 11 assists a few years ago, unheard of. I said Chris Paul might do it this year, and we still had him above Chris Paul. So
He just does all the other things, and I think John Wall still is a very good defensive player. I hate saying that because Toronto and Washington had some great battles. And back when Toronto and Washington had those great battles, I probably would have said John Wall was a better player than Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry proved a little bit of a difference maker in the playoff, but now Kyle Lowry's getting a little bit older, and he's no longer really the main ball handler on that team. John Wall will be. I think that's where the difference comes in.
yeah, I agree.
Moving on from John Wall, a great player, but now we're going into an even nether echelon. Well, some people will say we're wrong here. Maybe people will say this player is not as good as someone like Trae Young or Kyle Lowry or Chris Paul. But we have Darren Fox, who just signed a max contract, even though people are chirping him for signing, or chirping Sacramento for signing to a max contract. The guy shows promise. He's the leader of that team.
Yeah, and he's a guy who took a big step last year in terms of really being that leader, like you said. Yes, he obviously did put up better numbers on the board, but he really took a huge step in that leadership role, and he did get Sacramento to look like a competitive team, maybe not night after night, but for a good chunk of the season, they actually looked like they were a decent team. They did have some drama towards the end of the year and obviously going into the offseason as well. But you know what? Who knows how long that was dragging? They got rid of a piece that was dragging on for them. They got Hassan Whiteside, and I could see there being a lot of plays where De'Aaron Fox, like you said about John Wall, he's in a lot of ways, I think, the new John Wall, where he's probably the quickest guy in the NBA today, and he's going to have the ability to really set up Hassan Whiteside, almost like a DeAndre Jordan, where it's not going to be a Showtime thing, but in terms of getting a lot of easy alley oops and putbacks, De'Aaron Fox and Hassan Whiteside are going to look like a very good 1-2 tandem in that regard.
The pick and roll is going to
Yeah,
be very nice between them, right?
absolutely.
And I think Fox is still getting better and better and better every year. And that's why I put him ahead of John Wall, Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul, because Fox is only going to have a better year, while we've probably seen the best years we're ever going to see from those players. As much as we can see John Wall making a comeback, we've probably seen the best John Wall we're ever going to see. But if he comes back to 95% of the player he was, he's still top 10. But Darren Fox, I think, is just a bit ahead of him because we don't know what the future is going to bring. This could be all he is, but if this is all he is, he's still a top 10 player. But he has so much potential to be even more, especially on that Sacramento team. To get any higher in this is going to be very difficult, though. So
Honestly, I think it's very possible because it's a guy who was actually first in field goal percentage for point guards who took 15 or more shots last year, but he was actually only shot 30% or so from three-pointers.
Yeah, he couldn't really shoot a three.
Yeah, and then we see guys like Deontay Murray, who we spoke about earlier in this list, who they really eventually started to find that jump, where he also was 28% throughout his first couple years. I believe they're in the same draft, but I'm not. I feel like the three-pointer, especially for point guards, is one of the easier skills to develop over time. Where we could easily see De'Aaron Fox jump 6 to 7% in 1 year. It could even be this year. And then if he hits 1 to 2 more threes per game, we're talking about a guy who 24, 25, 26 points per game easily.
Big difference.
Yeah, like we said, he's already up there in terms of being one of the best passers out there. He's already sort of definitely not in terms of assist wise, but in terms of being quick and just being able to set guys up. In terms of, like I said, running that pick and roll with the white side, it's going to be a lot of easy dishes for him there. So I really see De'Aaron Fox making a big improvement even this year, where he went up to 21 last year. I could see him going up to 24 this year easily.
Even if he does that, in my mind, I still don't think he gets any higher. And the reason why I say that, because I'm actually just going to roll into our next one, because Fox is a really fantastic player, and I think he's actually going to have 25 points per game next year. And that's very possible. But the guy we have on top of him, like, I know that you didn't have as much faith in him as I did. I don't think, because we talked about this a little bit beforehand. But here at the number 7 spot, I have this guy number 3. We have Steph Curry. I think he's a dark horse MVP candidate, to be honest.
Hey, I mean, it's very possible.
And he's a difference. He's a complete opposite of Fox. That's why I don't think he can. I don't think Fox can get up to this level unless Steph Curry gets hurt again.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible that we could obviously see the old Steph Curry because, like I kind of said about John Wall, unlike a guy like Derrick Rose, he's not a guy who needs to just have explosiveness for his game to take off, especially a guy like Steph Curry, where he obviously one of the best three-point shooters, not just in the game today, but of all time. We've seen him break multiple records in that regard. So he's going to be able to obviously use that to his advantage. My big thing was, like I said about John Wall, I do think him and Curry both are going to come out with something to prove this year. The main difference is I think that Golden State team isn't going to be as good as a lot of people are hoping. 'Cause the best version of Steph Curry we see is when Klay Thompson is out there, and they just to get play that ring around posy or circle kind of offense where it's just one of them just passing through till one of them gets a three. He can't do that with Andrew Wiggins. He can't do that with Kelly Oubre. He can't do those with those guys. He's really going to have to rely on being a playmaker a lot more this year. Not that he doesn't have that ability, but I think that makes it more likely for him to potentially get hurt again. But even if he is healthy, I think we're only going to see him maybe put up 22 per game and be like a 7 and 8 or 8 per assist per game guy. Then maybe make the playoffs and honestly probably miss again. Get another good draft pick, Clay come back healthy, and then maybe next year we're really talking about Curry in that top 5 potential MVP candidate.
You're hurting me at the end there. Potentially missing the playoffs, likely missing the playoffs. Ouch. Have some faith in the former MVP back-to-back MVP guy. He I'm not even going to refer to any of his stats he put up last year because he only played 5 games and he came back from injury to a team that was the worst team in the league. I think Steph Curry's going to come back this year actually healthy. We know what he can do from 3. He's the best 3-point shooter of all time. I know that you're right. You're absolutely correct. He's plays best off of with Klay Thompson. But without Klay Thompson there's going to be more shots for him. And as much as Wiggins and Oubre are much different players than Klay Thompson, they are guys that you can still include in the offense and you can still move them around a lot. And I just see Curry taking over a lot of these games because he has something, like you said, he has something to prove. He wants to go in there and really dominate. I see him putting up 11, 12 3-pointers per game, pulling a Trae Young, James Harden, shooting the ball from wherever he wants. It used to be a thing a couple of years ago, back when he was in his prime MVP seasons, that you guarded Steph Curry from the half court because he was going to pull up anywhere.
He did anywhere. Westbrook and he made it on him. Where he put up between half and a 3, and he made. Well,
that's what Curry does. So like I see him coming back because I think he's someone who practices very, very hard, and the fact that he just had a full off season, as like they didn't play in the bubble. He's been relaxing since March. He's been taking it easy since March. He's going to come back and the best player that he's ever been. All these other players, they were playing in the bubble 3 months ago. Curry wasn't playing. All these guys are going to be a little bit slower, a little bit more tired. They played until August. August. Curry stopped in March, and a lot of players that didn't play in the bubble are going to come back and be a little bit rusty. Curry won't. He's not someone who fucks around with. He's not someone who takes a moment off. He's someone who puts up 1,000 3-pointers in a practice session and makes 900 of them, or 950 of them probably. I just see him coming back and having an MVP caliber year. I don't think he's going to win MVP because there's other players that at this point stuff the stat sheet like crazy. But Curry, I see him having a top 3 MVP season and leading that team to a top 4 seed.
You know, it is. He's got to lose the headband. I mean, in those 5 games, he shot under 25% from three.
I'm not listening to those 5 games.
He's got to lose the headband. He wore the headband during the 5. He just needs to lose it, come back, and make it Curry.
He's got to throw a couple mouth guards. He'll be happy. He'll be good to go.
There you go. Make Under Armour.
But I wish he was a little bit higher because, like I said, I did have him number 3. But Curry, just keep on balling. Show us wrong. Prove us wrong. Golden State fans, shit on us, but subscribe because at the end of the year, we might be making a video about how we're wrong. Wouldn't you love to see that?
Hey, well, you're right, technically. You're just showing your own list, right?
I'm waiting for it. So moving on. We have former MVP, back-to-back MVP, unanimous back-to-back MVP, Steph Curry at number 7. At number 6, we had another player, very, very good young player, and a player we have not seen what his potential can be. And the guy he's probably the worst three-point shooter in the league. We got Ben Simmons coming in at number 6. I don't know what to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a guy who, on any given year, Ben Simmons has MVP potential. Just because he's able to do a bit of everything, where he could put up a triple-double on any given year, and that Philadelphia team could be the best team in their conference or the NBA in any given year too. It hasn't happened, and the reality is it doesn't look promising to happen anytime soon either. Both between Philadelphia being that top seed and Ben Simmons taking the jump into being an MVP candidate, where he almost seemed like a better player and I guess even more confident in his rookie and sophomore year than he is nowadays. And it's sad in that regard because everyone was on the Ben Simmons hype train, and now it feels like 40% of people you talk to who used to be on that hype train just aren't feeling the same that they used to about him.
And that's just it, right? Because if anything, if you're looking at him, he hasn't improved in 3 years. He has not improved. And a big part of that is being on a very successful team like he is in Philly, they were before. They weren't even a successful team last year. Well, they have so many other stars around him that it makes it difficult for him to really unleash his game to the potential it can be. But again, if you just shot 1 3-pointer every now and then, shot it at 250, you'd open up that offense so much more and be able to open up so many more things for that offense. If we were in the year 1985, Ben Simmons would probably be one of the best players in the league. But his game just doesn't equate to success in today's NBA.
No, and I mean, it's a guy who it feels like the shots he take are almost like the same caliber as the center, where his field goal percentage is super high. I believe, even had the first field goal percentage of all point guards, but he only took 11.4 shots throughout. He only took 11.4 shots, but he was fifth in minutes with 35. So this is basically a guy who is taking, 3 shots per quarter, and he's out there 9 minutes of that quarter. So, like you said, Ben Simmons, he doesn't do that much in that regard. Unless he has a drive to the net, you're not really worried about him scoring, honestly. And he's not a guy who, I mean, he doesn't shoot the free throw particularly amazingly. He is really only good as a point guard in a lot of areas because he's one of the biggest ones. He was first in steals with 2.1, tied for second in blocks with 0.6, fifth in rebounding with 7.8. But when you're 6 foot, what is he? 6'7", 6'8"? Of course you're going to be near the top of the categories when your limbs are twice the size of everyone else's. When you have 5 inches on
6'10".
Yeah, 6'10". Like, so I mean, of course, you should be fantastic at boxing out other point guards. You should be fantastic at blocking them. You should be fantastic at just reaching out and intercepting a pass whenever they go to pass it. So these are things that we expect Ben Simmons to be good at. And like you said, it could actually maybe change his game a lot if he tried to worry less about the true shooting and field goal percentages and just took a couple of threes, just to switch up the offense, just made it seem like there is some type of threat out there. Because
There's a chance, right?
absolutely.
And how many steals did he get? Did he lead the league in steals last year?
I don't think he led the league. He might have led the league in steals. I don't know, but he did have 2.1, which led all point guards.
2.1.
I want to say he was the only point guard to have over two per game. I might be
I
mistaken there.
I feel like he led the whole league. I don't know,
It's definitely
but
possible.
that's incredible. Like his defense is there, and that's why he's ranked so high. Like, we're gonna see in our top five that the top five is very, very, very skilled, on another level skilled. Guys that are proven to be the leaders of their team. Ben Simmons is not the best player on his team. 2 years ago, he wasn't the second best player on his team. Last year, when he was the second best player, they crumbled. And even with him being the second best player, they still had another potential fringe all-star like Tobias Harris. They still had an Al Horford who's coming off maybe 1 or 2 years removed from an all-star season. There's no reason why he can't take another step. I just don't understand. He needs to be able to improve that shooting, or else I don't know. He'll never get to the top five.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who, in his rookie year, I remember seeing him just make a certain drive. I forget about which team, but it reminded me so much of LeBron James, where I thought to myself, I haven't seen a guy being able to just power through the lane, make guys move, and just do a one-hander the way that Ben Simmons did, except for LeBron. And now it's
He's so close.
exactly, it's just like you said, there's no other elements to his game that he's improved. And eventually, when a guy can only do one thing, you start to learn how to guard him. Where, like LeBron,
LeBron has improved
exactly. He's improved everywhere, and that's really why
every year.
exactly. That's why he's so versatile. That's why every time you have a critique, he changes it. For Ben Simmons, seems to takes it to heart. Feels like he doesn't have to improve because he's already good enough. Like that's not the way to go about it. And if he wants to be an MVP, if he wants to be in a true top five point guard in the league, that's something that he needs to change.
Right now, the player Ben Simmons is today, currently, tops out. The best he can ever be is 18-year-old LeBron James. That's it.
And that
I
was
don't see him being any better.
yeah, and that was LeBron's only year of that, or one of the only years under 27 per game. And ironically, if Ben Simmons were to win an MVP, I don't see it being better than that either. I see it being like a 24. It'd be because he got close to a triple double that year, and the team finished
And the
first.
team success.
Exactly, but I still don't think it'd be over 25 points per game. I think it'd be like
Like,
20, it'd be like 24, 10, and 9 or something. It'd be something.
can you picture a team where Ben Simmons is the number one player and that team actually being a number one team in the league?
I
A
mean,
lot of these players, I can picture that happening. I just can't. Like, he's not the best player on his own team.
yep.
It's not close.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they already hit their peak, right? Where they did have that conference finals. They were number two seed.
It'd be sad to hear because they're so young and they've only played to get together for 3 years now. This will be the fourth year, and they're such a young team. But like someone like Ben Simmons just was never able to take that next step. If they would have been able to take that next step with Ben Simmons, they would have went even further with Jimmy Butler. They
Yeah,
would have been a higher seed last year.
yeah. All they need to do really is trade him to San Antonio, like we said in another video.
Give the team a chance.
Exactly. Three-way
Get
trade,
Harden
James
in.
Harden to Philly, Ben Simmons, San Antonio. Check out our trade machine videos if you haven't seen it. With that being said, with all the point guards being so deep and us talking about them for a pretty
It's so
long
hard.
time, we're gonna end the video and we're actually gonna make this a three-parter.
Top five
We're gonna do
tomorrow.
top five tomorrow. We also have our season previews coming with those two. So good stuff coming there. NBA season underway next week. Preseason's already started. Already been some good action so far. Like we talked about John Wall having a big game, a couple other guys. So
Yep.
wait to see what
It's
happens.
exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
Basketball is back. There's gonna be a crowd in the stands now for the first time.
Yep.
It's awesome. Even Tampa's getting a crowd.
Yeah, I mean, Florida doesn't care, of course, they were going to have clouds. It's a discussion for some other day. But with that being said, subscribe if you
That's it. Sign off.
we definitely appreciate it. And we'll be back with a
Subscribe.
and we'll definitely have our season previews out by Friday as well. Thank you.
Watch them all.